Recently, we've had some great summers which have really helped my garden to thrive. But a thriving garden is far from a given, and record temperatures and droughts this summer have seen my garden really struggle. I want to show you some of the things that have gone wrong for me this year, what I'm going to do to fix them, and the precautions I'll be taking for next summer. Hot weather means stressful conditions for many crops, especially if you're not around to water. Now, we've had our first rain here in weeks just last night, and the garden's really soaking it up. But this summer we've had record-breaking heat that's been in the 90s Fahrenheit or mid-30s Celsius, and not far from here it's been up to 40. That's exceptional heat, for here at least. So let's look at 4 crops which have really struggled with this heat and drought. So the first crop are squash family veggies, which include my zucchini or courgettes here. Now, the big problem with these is powdery mildew, and this is often a problem in dry summers, and I just haven't been able to give them as much water as I'd like. It's not the end of the world because plants do continue growing, but obviously with the green leaves replaced by this powdery mildew, there's less photosynthesis going on, so the plants have got less energy. So the best thing to do is simply to cut the worst affected leaves off and encourage newer, fresher, undiseased leaves to follow on. One thing you can do to help alleviate the effects of powdery mildew is to spray on a dilute solution of cow's milk, and it must be cow's milk, and water, and spray this all over the leaves nice and evenly, top and bottom. And this is really meant to help reduce the effects of powdery mildew. I did it once, which wasn't enough. You've got to maybe go over once every couple of weeks. I'm quite lazy, so it's not the best technique for me, but cutting back leaves has seemed to have had quite a good effect on my other zucchini plants dotted around the garden, and we'll have a look at those next. It's the older leaves that tend to get affected with powdery mildew, so by cutting those off, you're leaving the younger leaves at the top of the plant. Now, I've been repeatedly removing the leaves on these plants, and what I've been left with is this remarkable trailing beast. Just look at it. But you notice the leaves here are still quite zesty and green, and as the older ones get affected, they get cut off. So to accommodate this, next year what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to grow my plants vertically. I'll either use something like this, some sturdy T-bar left over from a previous vegetable arch project, or I might use some sort of trellis. Either way, I'm going to get my plants up off the ground so they get plenty of light and airflow, which should reduce the mildew risk, and also I reckon it'll create quite a beautiful vertical feature as well. Many crops have bolted or flowered prematurely before I've had a chance to harvest them. The leeks have done that, but the worst offenders are beetroot and this chard here. Now, I planted lots of chard in spring and it almost immediately bolted, meaning I didn't get any of those big luxuriant leaves to harvest like I normally do. The secret to success of many gardeners is not that they get things right first time, really very few of us do that. It's more that they have spare plants waiting in the wings should something happen. Now, I've got some chard here that I sowed last month specifically to replant to fill in on those others that have failed, and they've grown and they're ready to plant. So I'm going to get them in here. I've just scattered some chicken manure pellets which have got a bit of nitrogen in them, which is good for these leafy plants. If you're a vegan gardener, you could use something like comfrey pellets instead. Just going to pop them in about a foot to a foot and a half. That's 30 to 45 centimetres apart. These climbing beans, a variety of fine green bean or French bean, have really suffered in the heat. I've been away for a few weeks on the break, we all deserve one of those, and in that time they've really struggled. My neighbour, bless him, has done his utmost to keep them really quenched, but in such challenging weather it was always going to be difficult to keep them in fine fettle. Well, the result is they've pretty much dried out, and after giving a promising initial harvest, well, they've started to spiral into decline. Compare them to this arch of runner beans, which are clearly still thriving and cropping really strongly. They're slightly overhung by the apple tree, which has cast some shade and has probably helped in this hot weather, but nevertheless, they've outshone the French beans in front of me on every single level. This really illustrates the point of spreading your risk. Grow more than one variety or type of each crop, And that way, if it's unusually hot or cold, you still will get something to pick and enjoy, hopefully. And then some veggies just look a bit smaller than they really should, such as this corn. The cobs look like they're ready to harvest, but judging by the size of them, I think we're in for a disappointing harvest. Nevertheless, let's harvest one now and see what we've got. Well, it's not going to win any awards, but there is something decent here to eat and it looks pretty healthy. Next year, I'm going to really concentrate on improving the soil much more than I have this year in this bed anyway, by digging in and incorporating lots more organic matter so it better retains moisture, which will really help if we get another hot and dry summer. At least this corn hasn't been attacked by pests, especially hungry pigeons, which seem to have attacked just about everything else this summer. As gardeners, we're always going to have to roll with the punches, and pests throw plenty of those. The dry conditions have meant very few slugs, but don't worry, there are always going to be plenty of other pests to step in. Here are 3 of them. First up is flea beetles, and you can see the damage they've caused by the pinholed leaves of this perennial kale here. And if we look down at these sweet Alison plants here, we can see that the little blighters are still lurking. I had planted some follow-on cabbage family plants. That includes things like kale, cabbage of course, cauliflower and these broccoli here, but they've really struggled in the heat and drought. We've got a hose pipe ban here, so I've had to water these by hand and lugging backwards and forwards, watering cans full of water, well, it's time consuming. And the result is these haven't got enough water as they'd ideally like, so they've become more susceptible to flea beetle attack. I'm going to have to replace a lot of these plants, so I've ordered some plants online which will arrive by mail, and then I'm going to pot them up and grow them on away from the beds here in the hope that in the meantime the flea beetles will clear off elsewhere. Now come and have a look at this bed here. This was sown for our late summer starters video, and after really germinating and growing strong, something's come along and caused this havoc. I had row covers here and whatever it was has torn it open, scattered soil everywhere, and basically all of the seedlings have perished as a result because they've been uprooted. It could be a badger, but I suspect it's probably a fox. I'm not even sure if foxes eat potatoes. What do you reckon? What the foxes were after was some old potatoes that I'd accidentally forgotten, because those were uprooted and scattered everywhere as well. It's been a tough time for them. And then over here, they've dug up all of my ornamental alliums as well. To be honest, I don't blame the foxes. They're hungry. There's not been natural food out there because it's been so dry and they're only trying to survive. But the lesson learnt is to dig up all of the potatoes that are left in the ground to make really sure there's no tasty titbits lying around and to keep a closer eye on things. The other major pest is pigeons, and they have been totally active this summer. Turn my back for a minute and they're pecking at the seedlings, tearing them out and scattering them left, right and centre. I've had to resort to covering just about everything with row covers like this just to keep them protected from those pigeons so they can grow on a bit and then they can be removed once they're better able to withstand the occasional rasping peck. I expect, as well as being hungry, the pigeons have just been plain thirsty. The struggle is real. It's just been so darn dry. And the heavens have opened. Rain at last. Until now, the rain has been really inconsistent. It hasn't watered properly since the start of summer. So it's no surprise then that the water barrels we've got have quickly drained through, leaving them empty. I wanted a convenient stash of water up here to water the beds here in the greenhouse. So when they emptied, I actually dragged the hose pipe up here when we could use it and filled the barrels up so I had a convenient supply of water. But that really isn't in the spirit of collecting rainwater, is it? So the solution for next year is, I think I'm going to clear this area here and drop in an IBC tank. This roof here is a really good size and recharges an empty barrel in just one good rainstorm. So an IBC should soon fill up, I reckon. They hold about 1,000 litres. This thing here holds a measly 250 litres. So I'm instantly quadrupling the amount of rainwater I've got here. Some plants absolutely love it, dry and blisteringly hot, like my super spicy chili pepper collection. Now, we saw these in the earlier summer garden tour, which I'll pop a link to down below, but boy have they grown on since then. They've just adored this weather. I've potted them up since then into bigger pots using the recommended mix, which is 50-50 normal potting mix and then coconut or coir fibre to open it out and for better drainage. And you can see there's loads of fruits here. I'm going to try harvesting one because I did promise at the time a bit of a taste test. This is a Scotch bonnet. I'm going to nibble it very tentatively just to get an idea of its heat level. It's okay. Not bad actually. It's pretty spicy, but actually I think it's a bit of a slow burner because it's definitely beginning to sting now. The lemongrass here has also really thrived in the heat. These were sown much later than recommended in late spring. We need to be sowing them in late winter, but the heat has meant they've caught up and I'm confident we should get a decent harvest of stems. Next season I'll sow them at the recommended time in late winter, so we'll get a crop no matter what the summer holds. Do you know what? I absolutely love just sitting in the greenhouse when it's raining. It's so soothing. Not that I get much chance to sit around, if I'm frank. Now, one other crop that has really benefited from the heat and the dry weather are tomatoes. The dry air means there's not been any sign of blight so far, and we've got them going along much later in the summer than I've had in previous summers actually. I've already been picking loads, but they're ripening really fast now, and there's another batch ready to harvest. So I'm going to pick some now to, well, maybe have for dinner or make into a sauce later on, perhaps with a little bit of gnocchi or pasta or something. And then just look at this gorgeous pumpkin. It's a beautiful colour already and a reasonably good size. Now, because the weather has turned a bit damper, I'm going to raise the pumpkin off the ground onto a board to stop it from being in contact with the wet soil so it can finish off ripening without rotting. My plans for this are to make a pumpkin soup and then hopefully a pumpkin pie as well. The seeds, I'm going to roast those. I've done it before and the result is outstanding. If you'd like to know how to do that, then do check out my video on that, link below. The great news is it started to rain again and there's loads more in the forecast. Hurrah! No more running around with the watering can. Hey look, gardening's always going to throw up challenges and keep us on our toes, but that's half the fun, right? If you enjoy peeking behind the scenes of real gardens like this, then have a sticky beak at my earlier garden tours, including this one here, where I show you my strategy for the super spiciest chilies, and this one here, where we get those chilies started off in the first place. Thanks for joining me today. Do check you're subscribed and/or drop this video a like on your way out, and I will catch you next time.